Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, DevOps.com. We're happy to have you here with us. Our topic is a great one, top cybersecurity threats and how SIEM protects against them. My name is Mitch Ashley. I'm Managing Analyst with Accelerated Strategies Group, and I'll serve as your host and moderator. A few housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar, and we will be sending a link to all participants via email for both the webinar recording and also the slides. We're also giving away three $50 gift cards to 3 lucky participants, so please hang around to the end and we'll be announcing who those are. Our speaker today loves questions, and he'll be doing some fun interactive demo as well as talking through some slides and things. And so please enter any questions you have into the GoToWebinar control panel in the questions tab. So let's get to our topic, top cybersecurity threats and how SIEM protects against them. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Bob Erdman, who's Senior Security Product Manager, Threat Solutions at Health Systems. Bob, let's take it away. Turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you. Yes, my name is Bob Erdman, and today we're going to talk about some of the common security challenges that we see when we're out in the field and working with customers, and talk about how SIEM and SIEM solutions can really help protect against these different things and give you that instant warning and the types of information that you need to protect yourself and your environments. And we're seeing more and more hackers attacking our businesses and our systems, coordinated attacks, either from nation states or just people wanting to try and extract money from you and your customers. And some of the more common things we see are listed up here on the screen. Malicious insiders. People oftentimes forget about that. Maybe I have a disgruntled employee or someone who's recently been let go and just maintain their access. Inadvertent insiders also, we have problems where people maybe break something by accident, which can cause us a lot of financial damage. Giving too many roles and permissions to people. We're not paying attention to who can access what. One of the most common things that we see, just simple misconfigurations of the environment. If you look out over the last few years, the vast majority of breaches that have happened were simply misconfigured systems that allowed somebody easy access to an environment. Of course, there's always the brute force attacks, people just trying to jam passwords until they can get into the system. And one other thing that we see that's not so much security related from an attacker perspective, but more of the defenders, red team, blue team, purple team kind of side, is just console fatigue and alert fatigue. Some of the systems that we build out, some of the environments that we try to put these people in, many different screens, thousands of things happening a day, and most of which they really don't need to look at. How do you find that needle in the haystack and get to the really important things that you need to worry about? So we're going to talk through some of the challenges that we see, some of the scenarios that we work with a lot, and we'll give a little product demo as well and just kind of let you take a look at the environment. So when we talk about malicious insider threats, we've done some surveying, and well over half of the respondents we had are concerned about those insider threats. And that's really the people in your company taking advantage of you. So who are those people? Someone either working on behalf of outsiders or a lot of times just stealing information to try and sell it for personal gain. So you think about some of these SIM swap type things. That's a very good example of the inside outside. A lot of times there will be an inside employee at one of these cell phone type stores that's getting paid by an external actor to help them steal access to somebody's environment, somebody's phone. So they're coordinating attacks either with somebody from the external side, or maybe just internally they're using that same type of flow for themselves. When we're looking at IT, one of the things that we'll see is maybe, an example, web administrator is trying to access confidential user information from our customer database. Is that something that we would expect to see? Is that something that we should be alerted on to make sure that we know who is reading some of the data that we don't expect them to be looking at? And what we'll do when we're looking at how those SIMs work then is, the first thing is getting those real-time alerts. So we see a security control that's like, I need to know everybody who's accessing this certain piece of data within my environment that's very important to me and very protected. And I want to get an alert every time somebody looks at that. And is it someone that I expect to see? Is this normal course of business that my web admin is going to be trying to read that customer database that's being used on the back end? And maybe we're going to do some automated workload information in there, so we can be prompting with, hey, is this something we should be locking an account? Maybe we want to stop this so that we can go and investigate it and make sure that we know that this was either valid, or this was accidental, or this was really something malicious that we need to be concerned with and kind of take some kind of remedial action. And we're going to, by having a solution like our SIEM that's tracking all of this, and it's also tracking everything else in the environment, we can do a really good forensic analysis to see, hey, what else was that person looking at? Where else have they been in the last day or maybe the last week? Have they really been poking around where they're not supposed to be? And we can see a pattern of abuse. They're using credentials that maybe had more access than they should have had to go in and try and look at things that we didn't really want them seeing. And it gives us the way that we can bring all of those different pieces of what's been happening together and look at them in a holistic way so that we can make those final determinations on what we're going to do. So if this was really something malicious, we can take that action with that person. If this was something accidental, maybe we can do a role review and make sure that we haven't given that role too many permissions, so we can limit what they actually get a chance to look at to help protect ourselves from those things. And that's why we like to use something with some intelligence like a SIEM to be able to get that holistic view rather than just our standard log streams, and be able to bubble that up where we know that it's important. So as we go through these examples, we're very much going to look at those same types of things. Inadvertent insiders are very much in that same vein. Somebody making a mistake, doing something, they didn't really mean to do something bad, but they did something damaging by accident. Even more people are really concerned about those insider threats. I made a mistake. I hit the off button. I hit the delete button. I did something I did an example of. These days, the biggest one, I clicked on a phishing email by accident. I thought it was real. I thought there really was a problem with that invoice, so I clicked on it to look. Suddenly, I've opened the door to my network to somebody malicious coming in from the system. People that have poor passwords because we haven't controlled the rules well enough, where they're allowing them to do bad things. Orphaned accounts are one that we see quite often. If you look at the typical things that somebody in a mid-level, or especially in an IT type role would have access to in your environment, when that person leaves the organization, how good are your controls at finding all of the different things that they had access to and turning those off? IT is usually pretty good and fast about just disable AD. Suddenly they've lost access to their Windows machine. But what about all the other stuff? The password vaults, the Linux, Unix systems, one that I see missed a lot. What about all the external portals they had access to? Are they accessing your partner programs? You're thinking Microsoft, did they have an MSDN account now that you need to revoke? So different other places, making sure that you found all of those and you know what's going on. And if you ever see anybody attempting to use that, that's when we're going to be caring. Another common one that we see is geographical. You couldn't have traveled there type separation. So if we see something suspicious, the intelligence inside of our solution is going to be able to alert us to what's going on. So if we see a network administrator logged in at their workstation at headquarters, then they also look like they're logged in remotely. Is that something that we would expect to see, or is that one of those, you couldn't have traveled there, you couldn't do this thing? Somebody might be maliciously using somebody else's account. So we want to make sure that we could alert on something like 2 active sessions being created at the same time. And in some organizations, 1 session login is a restriction they have to enforce. This is an example that I actually get busted with a lot, just because of the nature of doing my demos. Sometimes I'm at my desk, I'm running a demo like we are today, or a webinar, and I might also be logged into our VPN on my cell phone, so I can screen share my cell phone app and show some of the ways that it talks into the solution. Now I look like I'm logged in twice. And is that normal course of business? Or the first time that wasn't, that they didn't understand, now IT kind of knows, hey, that's Bob in a webinar. Do we need to check the schedule, make sure that's Bob in a webinar? Is somebody using it the way they shouldn't? So being able to have that intelligence around what it is that we're doing. Again, this type of thing, we might just be prompting for an account freeze. Lock Bob's account until we figure out if it's really him, and make sure that we know what's going on. And then start to evaluate that behavior. That's, again, we're getting that holistic data look at the whole enterprise. I can see everything that the Bob login was doing over here at the desktop. I can see everything that the Bob login was doing from the remote access that was coming through our VPN in a different country. And I can correlate them and make sure that it's really, truly Bob, or is somebody maliciously using his account in one or the other environments, so that I can take that action again on that final investigation. And we're really using our SIEMs to investigate and remediate. I see an alert, I found something that needs to be looked at by a pair of eyeballs now, and now I need to go and work that to close, figure out if it was good or if it was bad. If it was bad, what actions I need to take so that I can work this to the end and go on to the next thing that I need to be concerned with. So we're using it very much as a way to increase the security of our environments, not just have it blinking in the background, because we see that a lot. People are getting so many alerts sometimes. If they're not prioritizing what really matters to their system, the data is just scrolling. And something happened, I can go back and we can probably figure out where it alerted me and I missed it, but I'm not actionably using that kind of data. And that's what we really want to focus on, is getting actionable intelligence up to these analysts so that they can go out and then do the work that they need to do. Excessive access is another great example. Privileged access violations of the policies, people making changes to profiles that they shouldn't have done, seeing invalid login attempts. Is that a accidental failure? Is that somebody trying to get an intrusion into our systems? Seeing different things changed or deleted. Maybe that web admin person, and the first thing is changing parts of the web property, either maliciously to just, you could be doing disinformation campaigns. You could be trying to get bad reputation because I'm putting some kind of damaging info up on the screens. Maybe I'm trying to do something like coin mining and I'm trying to put a dropper in there. So every time somebody touches my web page, I'm going to put malicious malware up on those systems. So being able to monitor those types of things. All of those are ways that we can be watching our systems with our SIEM solutions and making sure that everything that's happening is something that we expect. So many web admin made some changes to server, and it was done by a web marketer, not somebody that we expected was going to be making alterations to our environment. They're more of a data person. We expect they're going to be giving us data and directions. So we're again getting that instant alert and letting us review the change logs of what was done. So we saw that these objects were altered by this user at this time. Are those objects valid still, or are they now something malicious that we need to revoke and pull back and make those changes? Giving us again that way to look at our solutions. So there's many different ways that we can use these, and we're just trying to pull up some of these ones that we see a lot as we're working with people. Web compromises are big these days. A lot of people are using that as ways to maliciously download information to systems. They're using it in defamation type cases where I just want to get up and put something up on someone's page until they notice it so that I can cause some havoc with them. More and more now, we're actually seeing people compromising domains and using that to feed malware. Where these phishing emails go is changing by the hour many times. And if I can compromise a domain of a reputable place and get it to serve my malware down, now when somebody clicks that phishing link and they go to greatplace.com, I have a better way to get them to go there because they recognize that and assume that it's okay, even though it's not, at least for a time being, until somebody discovers something like this and goes, what's that new thing that's now showing up on my system, and is able to remediate it and take care of it. Misconfigurations are a common theme. We see them all the time. It's something that we're always trying to deal with. Many times, especially like in firewalls, if you work in firewalls and you've seen some of the rule sets that people keep building and building and building, simple configuration changes can allow great access to the systems if they're not done correctly. You know, giving us ways to monitor those configurations over time, know if things are being changed, understand what was changed, and being able to validate that those changes were correct, or maybe missing a patch or anything like that. So, and it's not just firewalls, think anywhere on your server. Somebody goes and makes a change over time. Things happen many times to creep. It was locked down great a month ago. It was locked down slightly less a week ago. It's locked down not very good at all today because somebody fat fingered a typing and they changed something that they weren't supposed to change. So we want to make sure that we're always able to monitor for that security configuration drift and make sure that we're staying secure. So something like this, an example, we see, you know, a firewall rule being changed by an administrator, probably a valid administrator, but somebody changed a rule. Did we go through change control? Did we expect it? Do we want to make sure that we're creating an alert in real time that, hey, we just saw a rule modification on a critical piece of equipment in our infrastructure? And again, we want to make sure that somebody followed proper procedures. Was there a change ticket filed? Was the change ticket still open? Was this the person that was assigned to do the work, following our processes and procedures, giving us a way to verify and validate that, yep, that was fine. We expected Bob to go do that. He had a service ticket open and he had a window from 2 to 2:30 a.m. where he was allowed to go in and make that configuration update, and now his admin creds have been revoked by the automated system, and he's back the way he should be, making sure it was good as well as making sure if it was bad that we know what actually happened, and being able to assign those cases when they do need to be assigned to the proper security analysts. That's another great option inside of SIEM solutions, is that automation in the workflow. So when I'm seeing things happen, I can be pre-assigning who is going to be looking at those, either to certain teams or certain individuals. My firewall specialists are the ones getting notified for firewall issues. My Linux guys are the ones getting notified when there's login failure excessively at our Linux boxes. Maybe my Windows guys are getting notified when there's Windows issues inside of our logging environments. So we can automate some of that workflow and make things happen faster. So we get to the right data, get to the right people, and get it moving quickly. Even integrating with external ticketing systems like maybe a ServiceNow. So I'm automatically generating a ServiceNow ticket when I see that alert, which now is what that reviewer is going to be working against when they close out that alert to make sure it's been properly handled all the way through the misconfiguration event. Bruteforce attacks is another great one. Everybody thinks we have passwords locked down, so you're going to get 3 failures in a lockout, but a lot of times we don't, and it's happening more and more often. And it's not even always that they're just simply jamming on passwords until they guess the right one. They're using an automated tool to crack those passwords so that they can always use the right one. Many automated passwords crackers can generate billions of guesses per minute. It's very easy to do. We have services attached to some of our solutions where you can, in a pen testing engagement, use password cracking utilities to go out and try and break through those passwords. And it's very simple to go out on the dark web and download lists full of millions of different passwords and hashes that people have seen out there. So if you have problems where people are not creating complex passwords, or not limiting how many times you can successfully log in, or making sure that you're locking people out if they have too many failures, it could open us up to ways to get breached, that we weren't maybe really thinking about. If I'm looking at password reuse, possibly somebody else got breached, passwords were compromised. Now these same passwords have been reused in my environment because my users are reusing something that they know. Now they can use that other person's breach to compromise my systems in a much easier fashion. When we're looking at complex passwords, more and more often now, making my password 32 characters long is not the best solution. People can't remember it, they're writing it down. Everybody knows to look under the keyboard, to look in the top desk drawer, wherever the case might be. And it's much more now, get a usable length password that is good for your environment, but do better checking of the dictionary and the rules around that password. Make sure that I can't use common words, I can't use common phrases maybe. And don't just think English because we're sitting in the US. Many people are multi-language speakers. We should be looking at common dictionary words in Spanish, common dictionary words in French, doing a better job of pushing our users into a good direction with the passwords that they're using. The first thing everybody does when they go in to do an engagement is 2020 spring, because right now it's spring and it's 2020. Or you just whip them around, you do spring 2020 and exclamation point at the end. Somebody has used that password in the environment, almost always. So making sure that we can block some of those easy to guess things and make the attacker's job as hard as possible. If we look at just multiple failures, are we being alerted if we see a possible brute force attack? So a user account having a number of failed logins over the past hour, especially if we know that that person, and you correlate out, is not in the office at the present time. So making sure that we can be alerted to these facts, and that we're looking at repetitions here. So we can look at individual events, we can look at patterns, something like this. We're really looking at repetitions. I'm seeing the same bad thing happen multiple times. I'm expecting now that it's somebody maliciously attacking my system. And I want to be able to send out a very high priority alert and make sure that I can instantly lock out those accounts and take that remedial action to try and figure out what's going on. We've seen systems be crashed by this type of attack, even though they didn't ever compromise the system, because somebody had it opened up. They weren't limiting passwords, so I could fail as many times as I want, and it failed and failed and failed. And what they actually did was filled up the log file until they ran the partition out of space and took the whole server down, because every time they logged a password row, they had hundreds of thousands of failed password logs in the system until that file just got so big it tore the server down and took out a critical piece of the environment. So even if you do have hard to guess passwords, if you don't limit how many times they can be used before you take some type of action, you can still have damaging consequences inside of your environment. So that's just another way that we're helping with the SIEM and the solutions and making sure that we're setting proper authentication parameters. So we can do some front-end configuration checking. I go out and I've configured my systems to use the 222s. I want 2 upper, 2 lower, 2 special characters, and 2 digits inside of my passwords. And if I see somebody alter that configuration, I want to be alerted that that config was altered. Did I really expect somebody to be changing my password configuration on that system? That might trigger its own alert for me to go and look and make sure somebody didn't just misconfigure it. We're talking about alert and console fatigue. You know, as we're working in these environments, many times you're going to see that Christmas tree full of monitors. We've seen from the studies that we've done, average of 10 different systems that these analysts are trying to use to monitor their environments. So how are you keeping track of all those different things? And the challenge in those volumes of events make it really hard to uncover quickly what's going on. In a lot of these big, massive breaches that are making the headlines in the news that we've seen in the last few years, their systems alerted them. The problem was that nobody saw it because that alert was buried in thousands of other alerts. And we know from studies that 5 to 10% maybe of the things coming through the alert system are actually looked at by a person on a daily basis in these larger areas because there's just no way to physically do that much work. If you're getting 50,000 alerts a day coming through and you're going to try and have a person actually validate all 50,000 of those, they can't do it fast enough. You cannot hire enough bodies to put in front of those screens to make sure that you're looking at everything. So you got to have some intelligence behind you helping to prioritize and make those decisions on what to do first, where to go first. So making sure that we don't miss any of those security issues and making sure that we're able to understand what all this data is. So if I'm trying to look at login creations, for example, somebody built a new user Bob. The way that new user Bob comes through from Windows is a certain event ID. The way that new user Bob comes through from Linux is a different user creation role. The way that new user Bob comes through from an Oracle database is a different create user statement. And if I don't have a person that understands every one of those log streams to understand what's coming at me, I need a way to be able to filter that language and normalize it so this type of action, no matter where it happens in my environment, looks the same so that I understand what happened, and then I can go into that action to see the details of exactly how it was done on that different piece of the environment. So being able to normalize that data makes it easier for people to understand how things are progressing inside of their environments and give them a better way to manage and maintain those systems and those solutions over time. And that's really where we get to using the SIEMs to do that type of solution. We have one of our own, there's other ones out there, and that's the kind of thing that we want to do with Event Manager. So we're taking all those different data sources coming in. It might be hardware, it might be a software application, it might be an operating system, it might be a database engine, gathering all that different data, bringing it into a single system where we can normalize the data so that frontline view is easy to read and easy to understand. You can take quick action as you prioritize your events and give you a good way to do incident response. So I can quickly see what happened. I could do my forensic investigation. I could say, yep, that was an okay action, close it out, get rid of it. I could say, nope, this is a big deal incident. Somebody's inside our network and we need to start hunting and taking different actions on the system. And then giving a way to get through and do that audit report. Ways that I can go out and show what happened, show what was done, make sure that my auditors are happy, my PCI is okay, I've complied with GDPR and where my data went, all those different rules that all of us have to follow all the time. And those rules are just getting to be more and more. All the states now are starting to have their own privacy rules. So we've had New York's done financials, we had California come online recently. The government now is turning on CMMC for all the DoD suppliers. So as more and more of these rule sets come out, we have to have ways that we can track and audit against every one of those. And the more that we can do that in a single place, the easier it is for our people to manage and maintain. So I'm actually going to hop over and give you all a little quick demo since we promised that we would. We won't take too much of your time up with that. So we want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions as well. So if I'm just going to jump over here on my screen and get to my some of my product interfaces. So let's kind of look at one of the frontline screens of Event Manager. This is one I like to work out of a lot when I'm starting out what I'm doing, because this is kind of just giving me real-time historical also views of what's going on in my system, how much data is coming through, am I seeing big spikes in alerting traffic all of a sudden, or big drops in alerting traffic, maybe something broke. And it lets me kind of drill into the data that I want to look at. I like these screens, they're really cool because they give me quick access to all the numbers behind it as soon as I highlight over something, as well as the capability to drill in. Why is there a big dip in my traffic right here? What happened there that I might need to be concerned with? So I can pull in, get some better access, what's actually going on in the different pieces of my environment at that time. What assets are they happening on? What users are doing them? Gives me lots of ways to get in and look at those different pieces. And then I can drill in from this data view right into the actual data records that are going on in the back end. And I can customize these views any way I want to look. Lots of access options. Maybe all I care about here is user activity. I could certainly be highlighting my day only looking at user stuff, only the stuff I want to see on my desk, where somebody else may want to see totally different data on their desk. Same time period, suddenly all my graphs got really, really different because I just focused in on only certain types of data and what's going on within them. And then I can pop in from there and start to look at actually the different data records and what's happening behind them by just jumping over right into the event analysis screen, where it's going to show me the records that I was looking at and get me focused straight in on those. So it's going to bring us more into our dashboards as well. Freeform dashboards, a little bit like what we were looking at before, where an analyst is actually maybe working in those screens. These are much more the management reporting type things. So I want to give views into what's going on inside of my system, focused on the data that I want to look at. And this screen here, mine are a little bit ugly, but you can do some really cool things here because these are all freeform. If I toggle on edit mode, I can go in and make as many of these widgets as I want, make them in whatever style I want, looking at whatever types of data I want, change color schemes. I can change color styles. I can do different charting. I can do different options this way and make these look in different color groups. And however I want to see them, how often I want them to refresh. And as I do those, this is just my live preview, but then they'll snap back in. And I can have as many of these as I want. Some people have dozens of these up on great big monitors on the wall. Some just have one great big one of the really important stuff for operations. Let me get back out of edit here. And when I do these, I can actually share them out. So a lot of times we'll see people build these and they'll give them out to read only to their ops team. So you can't touch the data that I'm using, but I'm going to let you watch the data that I'm using. So you can get in and say, hey, what was that big spike right there? I need to go and investigate that. So it's kind of that looking for those red lines, making sure everything is showing as green and our SLAs are all being met. So just another neat option for us to be working with there. Product itself. Very much a active screen and a forensics type screen. So what are the things coming into my system? How am I going to view them? Searchable, of course, you want to just go in and look for records of type X or records from system X or certain operations. But honestly, a lot of people do it from the actual view screens themselves because every one of these fields is actually search and cert. So if I want to jump in and only look at certain things, I can hop in here and just select certain things and change my data views on the fly as I go. This one here is looking at just certain system controls. So anything that's been triggered by this security control of creation, modification, or deletion by non-administrators, I want to know about, because that's somebody who probably shouldn't have been making a change. We can see here a number of records are being changed for a user named Paulie. Why was Paulie even able to change the types of grants he had on his records? So we want to be able to look at those types of things in our environments. Many different things you could be looking at there. I just have a few pulled up right now. I could add as many of these other columns as I want to, or take away the ones that Bob gave me as my defaults, because I just want to hone in again on that data I want to see, hone in on these alerts and incidents inside of my system. I actually do have a number of incidents open on my demo system. It's always nice to have a few to show people and different ways to show them. So as I'm clearing those things out, I can go in and actually work with them. So all of the high runners, these are the things I would expect my team is working on first, because these have been looked at as a threat. evaluated to actually be a critical incident and escalated where they're popping up at the top of the list. So somebody should be working all of these. And you'll see kind of why as we go through, looking at these that, hey, I've got malware that I found inside of my systems. I saw what looked like a brute force attack from a number of login failures. I saw different things that happened. And it's nice because we can also, besides looking at the detailed data underneath these, we also can look at all the related alerts behind them. Something like a brute force attack, it's not only telling me that, hey, I saw this repetition behavior, but it's going to show me all of the different alerts that generated that repetition behavior, also tied to that incident. So why did I trigger that? Because I saw this whole string of login failures from this one user happening really quickly that made me think that this could very potentially be a brute force attack. Give me a way to start assigning reviewers, start escalating data. Here's the control again that triggered it. It was a different security control, as well as what systems that these operations came from, users they went on, systems they came to. So again, giving you all of that detail so that you can go and investigate around them. We click into some of these other ones just as another example, like a user disabled. So what action was performed, where it was performed from, who it was performed on, systems that were involved, and then I can make those decisions. Was this really something that I need to get escalated up to somebody? Maybe I need to get this assigned to a reviewer and get them out working on it and kicking across the system to make sure that this was valid. So lots of good ways to be able to get in and manage and work on that data. Looking at more of forensics behind that, that's very much what's happening around the system. So I didn't necessarily raise all of these things to alerts, but I had to save all of that data record because I might need to use it later. I don't want to lose data. I just want to make sure that I'm able to easier prioritize the data that I'm working with. So inside of forensics, we have additional data and rows, everything that maybe didn't get brought up to the top of the queue, but it's still available for us to go there and look at as we work on our systems. As well as ways to control that audit stream. So as we're talking about, hey, some of these guys are getting 50,000 rows a day. This system here is actually very chatty because we have a lot of things going on with it. So all the different pieces of the audit stream are actually configurable by that end user to quickly filter to what they want. So different applications that might have specialized streams just related to that application. Different back-end and operating system things. Maybe in my environment, I don't really need to get alerted on date time modifications. I don't care that much about it. Shut it off. It'll happen and they'll stick it in the logs, you'll still save it, but we're not going to raise alerts up into the front so that you can change what's going to those eyeballs. Or maybe I want to only see one row if I see a bunch of the same thing happening. I can create summarization rules where it's going to say, hey, I saw this happen 12 times. Just letting you know that it happened 12 times with a single row, so it's not cluttering up your screen. Or maybe I want to filter even lower on that, so I only care about failed logins if they happen from Bob. I really don't care about failed logins if they happen from my QA user. So I can filter out different people or different systems as well to get down to that nitty-gritty that we really care about as we're working on things. So able getting that to more of that, getting to the views we like. We actually have a lot of views I have built into my system here, a lot of regulatory views. So maybe I'm really concerned with getting the data out, applying to my PCI audits. So I can go in and grab those instant views from PCI audits and pull them up. I can also create views of my own. So I can create custom views. I can assign those out. So when I'm going to have my SOC team, then they're looking at our antivirus solution. So we have AV and malware protection, things all over our environment. Give me a quick way to just look at what that's doing on all of my endpoints. I might have thousands of endpoints out there with some kind of malware protection on them. I want a quick way to see what's in all of them. And I want to be able to assign it to different people. Some people I want to give it to, maybe I'm only going to give it to as a read-only. So David can look at this data. David can't change the way the data is being generated, where the admins or maybe Ken, I trust Ken can actually alter this view to maybe add some additional information or change the layout a little bit as he wants to. And when we do that, then it gives us quick ways to just jump into different data and filter on just what that data is. So now I just want to look at, hey, this is all the stuff on my environment just related to my malware protection. Malware protection that's out of date, starting and stopping. If I ever see somebody stop my AV engine, probably something I want to know about, because did we really want that turned off? That could be because somebody got in that machine. Now they're trying to turn off the alerting so no one's going to see it, and anything else that's going on. So lots of really neat ways to quickly work with data and systems in there, and being able to monitor and manage as we go along, and be able to work with those alerts to let us more quickly see what's happening. If I'm jumping back in here in my investigation, so hey, we know this was an alert. We thought we saw that brute force alert. We want to see everything that's happening around those systems. We can go over and do investigation work on those as well. So again, just giving us those quick ways to manage and monitor and maintain our solutions, and be able to track what these users are doing across our environments, so that we can quickly, again, get to them and work with them. So Mitch, I think we want to make sure that we leave plenty of time for questions here. So I think that we should take a look at what's in the queue and make sure that we can answer the questions from our viewing audience.
Alrighty, happy to do that. Great presentation, and congratulations on the Gremlin free demo.
It's always fun to go live.
Get your secrets later. Okay, great. So our first question from our participants or audience is, in your experience, what are the most common ways people are using SIEM? If you're not already using one, you can see how events and all that kind of stuff comes. Well, I'm sure there's lots of interesting uses that you see customers using it.
If I had to say most common across all the environments is for compliance. I have to be able to prove to my auditors that I'm compliant with, regulation X, Y, and Z, and usually it's more than one. So I probably got PCI because I'm holding some financial data, and I've also got customers from overseas, so GDPR applies. I need to know where the data is and who saw the data, and giving me ways to quickly be able to pull out the things that are in my audit streams that I need to prove my compliance. And the other most common is probably just getting a view of my environment as a whole. So if I am not being able to see all the different areas of my systems, I'm not knowing for sure how protected I am. Because as we know from the way hackers are working on things, we have pen test professionals, and the way they work at things is finding that weak point. All I need to do is find a weak point in the environment, now I can get in. And once I'm in, now I can stay in. Average, if you're not using some things to protect yourself, 100 days, 200 days. Ransomware is always the big one in the news. Ransomware is the last thing. That's the way out. I've been in there stealing your data for, hours, days, weeks. And as I exit, then I'm going to trigger the ransomware to kind of blow over the tracks and get that last bit of money from you. So we're using that to be able to see holistically everything in our environment. I need to know from IoT to my database engines what's going on, and being able to monitor them all at a single point.
Excellent, great. Next question is, how about on-prem versus cloud? How effective is SIEM at monitoring both of those environments?
You should be able to be very effective in both of those environments. We personally, in our customer set, usually are seeing a hybrid model. We're not seeing a whole lot of cloud only, although we can certainly work there. We're not seeing a whole lot of prem only. A lot of people are moving targeted workloads to the cloud, things that make the most sense as they move over time. So your SIEM can be deployed, honestly, anywhere. If I want my SIEM to run on-prem on a new server that I just bought, that's great. If I want it to run in my private cloud, maybe I'm going to spin up a virtual instance. I'm going to pop up a VMware Windows box and throw it, or something like that. Or if I just want to run it up in the cloud by itself, we can do that in any direction. So not only are we monitoring the assets in the cloud, so I spun up some infrastructure in the cloud. I want to make sure I'm monitoring that stack of Linux boxes serving my web page. I also want to be monitoring my management plane to make sure that as systems are being spun up, that only the correct people are doing it. They have the right access rights. They're not opening up an S3 bucket, for example, with read-write access to the world, where I can start to get data. As much as we saw that a few years ago, it's a little bit less, but it's still happening. It's popping up in the news still at least once a month that, hey, data set X was just found open and exposed on Amazon storage. Even with the controls they're giving you now, people are still missing things. That misconfiguration piece where I have bad permissions. So we should be able to see our cloud as well as deploy in our cloud if we want to.
Okay, wonderful. How about recommendations? What are the sort of keys for success for using a SIEM effectively?
What we really recommend, especially if you're new to using a SIEM, is to start with your most critical data first. So one of the things to do when you're looking at these exercises is, where are the crown jewels of your organization? Be it data, be it financial records, be it intellectual property and plans maybe for a certain widget that you're building or a certain piece of software. And you want to look at, where is that? That's the first thing I want to protect because that's my most valuable asset. And then work your way out from there if you are starting from scratch. So being able to look at the paths that somebody might take to get to that. How would an attacker come from the outside, get through my systems to reach that critical chunk of data? And that's the first thing I probably want to protect and make sure it's secured, and then work my way around that so I can build out my protection across my whole environment. If you look at even a small to medium-sized organization, you might have 1,000 endpoints between systems and services and security cameras and Wi-Fi routers. And if you're just going to try and jump in and say, starting today, I'm going to protect all 1,000 and look at them all, it's a heavy lift to get that all built out. So you can build out quickly what's most critical, and you can expand your way as you go through your environment and bring them all in. If you're just converting maybe from more of a logging style, maybe you're in just more of a flat syslog feed and you're trying to move into something much more intelligent, that's usually a little bit quicker lift. You've seen some data, you have it pushing out, and now you're really just replacing a kind of dumb, for lack of a better word, endpoint that's just recording records to more of an intelligent endpoint by just redirecting those streams. And we can do that a lot faster with people as they go.
Okay, great. Actually, we have a question here that kind of fits into this topic about setting things up. Are the alerts predefined, or do you need to set them in some way? How much configuration is required on the alerts?
With our solution, we are giving a large amount of predefined alerts, trying to take what we know as some best practices, but giving you the ability to change those, so you can of course alter what we're alerting on or just add your own alerts on top of it. We don't know everything and we don't know what exactly is best for your environment, so we want to enable a quick win by having things that are pre-configured and then allow you to alter it over time to hone in on exactly what it is that you care about. So not only asset templates for things like a router or a firewall or a Windows Active Directory system, as well as giving you control over what those are as you move through time and get better and better fine-grained inside of the solution.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Is there a time period you see it kind of takes people to get started to be able to start monitoring, or can you plug things in and really start to see activity right away?
You can get things plugged up and start to see activity really quickly. In an afternoon, you can have quite a lot of stuff sending you data. Now, getting to where you understand what the data is may take a little longer, and starting to take action on some of those pieces in your environment and getting a look at what maybe you don't know that's going on in your systems may take you a little longer, but we see people get effective on at least some of their environment really quickly. So that's why we like to know what it is that you want to do first, because we can turn that up really quickly and then you can start seeing what that is, and many times that'll lead to more things that you want to monitor as you see over time what's really happening.
Okay, great. Next question is, how do you connect the seemingly infinite data streams to a SIEM? It's like a lot of sources for what does that take to get that going?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways. And how you connect is going to vary somewhat based upon what the endpoints are. So for example, if we're looking at network appliance, switches, routers, firewalls, most of the time those are simply going to be pointing a feed. So they're going to be streaming their data, generally CEF or syslog, and all you need to know is what IP you're pushing it at. So that's one way. Looking at things more on the maybe Linux, Unix side, you might have syslog being pushed out. You might also have audit streams from like an audit daemon being pushed out. Windows, it's going to be more of a vet viewer API type pull out, so that we're pulling things out of those instrumentations. And then as you get more detailed, maybe what are my application workloads that I care about on top of those operating systems? So maybe I'm going to start getting database audits now from SQL Server or Oracle, and then application streams from, if I'm thinking financials, I got Swift transactions going on, so I want to get integration into my Swift transaction stream as I'm pulling that data out. So over time, we can get more and more fine-grained with what it is that we're watching as we start to build out our security environment. If we're starting from scratch, it really is a build out. We got to figure out what we didn't know, where things might be, what IPs might be out there that we didn't understand were out there. Sometimes these breaches are simply somebody dropped a rogue IP device out there. We saw that one at Jet Propulsion Labs, I think it was, not too long ago, where a Raspberry Pi was being used to hack the system. We found malicious actors sitting in all manner of IoT devices because all they need is that foothold. All the way down, maybe somebody's got the new coffee maker with that quick little app that says, hey, coffee's half full. I'm going to wait until Bob goes over there and makes a new pot before I get up. That's an IP stream. That's an interconnected piece of technology. That's something that I need to make sure I can protect, even because I could use that as my foothold. Many times those are just stripped down Linux distros, and if I can get in there now, I can sit there, and that's my beachhead in the environment. So I have to be able to see everything.
Very good. Our next question is just asking about what your particular licensing model is. Do you do it by nodes, monitored users, amount of data passing through the system? How do you look at monitor the licensing?
With our solution, it's really simple. It's just by nodes. Essentially, how many IPs you're pointing at it, or how many applications you're pointing at it. So there is no data cap or data throughput monitoring. So you're not penalized for having chatty systems, because we want you to monitor as much as you can and get the relevant data. We're not charging for users. It's multi-user by default. It's multi-tenant if you want to install it that way by default. So we do have the concept of tenancy in the system also. So if you're thinking maybe geographically, so Help Systems has a lot of offices all over the world. Maybe I want my Minnesota office to have this certain set of users, this certain set of controls is how they work. And my European office has a different set of users and a different set of controls they want to monitor. So I can do it that way. Or if I'm thinking more of an MSP, MSSP, I might want to provision this out to my different users, companies, data centers, and I want to tenant it by company that I happen to monitor. All of those things are just built in. Ours is really simple. Tell me how many endpoints you're going to monitor, and it's just that type of a cost model. So if I have 50 Windows systems and 6 applications, I'm just going to do the 56. And next year, I'm planning to expand by 10%. So as a budget guy, I'm going to start planning for next year. I need to bump up my license to 66 or whatever that might be. But it's a very simple licensing model, totally just based upon the number of things that you're going to attach to monitor.
Excellent. How about a situation, this is our next question, where can you implement this in a segregated network that's maybe not connected to your larger network?
You can. I mean, you could certainly put this in, more of an air-gapped environment, something that you have to keep protected or simplified by itself. Sometimes we'll even put our solution in along another SIEM solution that's monitoring a different section of the environment, just for a different use case or a different use group. So you certainly can put it in and start small or start segregated, where you're more of a offline. It's just my alerting plus my 20 or 50 or whatever devices I'm going to work with. That's completely doable. You may have to have, sometimes we see people with larger or geographically separated organizations, rather than having different tenants coming in, like I talked about, they might have different installations and they're smaller, and they've got a small installation in the US and a small installation in EMEA and a small installation in Latin America, and they're monitoring them independently. That's also certainly an option, and more of that type of a thing that you mentioned, like just could I have a small group somewhere?
Mm-hmm. Is there any connection to the internet required to get updates or?
Not required, no. You don't
rules?
have to have a connection to the internet. You can completely build this internal and essentially hide it from the world. If you were going to do a product update, you can just download that update in whatever media of your choice and sneakernet it across the gap, and then install it from the other side. So it doesn't have to reach out to get constant updates from the internet for any reason.
Oh, good. Sounds like you've got the air gap scenario figured out pretty well there. You mentioned earlier alert fatigue, and that being an issue. I've even heard CISOs say that's one of their biggest concerns with bringing any new tool in, is just more information, but doesn't solve any work. What are some strategies for minimizing or kind of getting down to those really truly useful, essential, most valuable alerts so your team's
Yeah,
working on the right stuff.
sure. Understanding that environment, what matters to you. And that's why we gave so many controls over the alert stream on our side. When we looked at that piece that had all those different little parts of that single systems audit stream, there's about, in that example, about 80 different pieces of that audit stream that I can give control of, and I can back off the alerting of the things I don't care about. So as we start to understand more and more what's critical to our environment, we can turn down the stream on the things that we don't care about and turn it up on the things that we do. What I care about as the user on my side might be completely different than what you care about in your use case on your side. And I have a lot of configuration available to me to minimize the things that don't matter, maybe generate reporting on the things that do matter and alert on them much quicker. So it comes with a bit of understanding the environment. If you really don't know what matters to you all that much and what's out there coming in from your systems, we probably have a little bit more of a volume of logs initially. And as you see them, you can roll down the priority on the ones that, hey, I've seen this all the time and it's not really a big deal. And I can roll up the priority on the other ones and maybe bump them to instant threats where they might just be coming in highlighted to start with. So configuration there is key in giving the flexibility for the end users to build in the pieces that they need to build in without having to go and calling support and changing product. It's just a quick, hey, I'm going to turn this off, I'm going to turn this on type of operation. Makes it a lot easier to get down to that, less consoles. So having that integration to all those different places as well. Again, we're starting to look at, just removing screens from the environment that they don't have to see. Looking at things like that dashboard where I can filter down on specific data sets and different information in a single pane of glass. Being able to maybe reduce against some of what's going on in the environment as far as what I have to look at. So maybe if I have a security tool over here on its own screen, let's just bring that security tool into the SIEM and look at it inside of the same SIEM stream with everything else. It's going to help us with context. It's going to help us with one less thing to monitor, give us a way to start to pull in that data and get down to what's critical to me, most important, fastest.
Great. Next question is, are there any special considerations of working with cloud native kind of applications? The cloud native meaning Kubernetes, containers, serverless, the new kind of application architectures?
Yeah, and they can certainly have different challenges with the types of data that they get. First off being, can you talk to the cloud effectively so that you can get that data? And then what does that data mean? We see cloud workloads from a lot of our clients that may grow and shrink greatly, really quickly. We know people are using use cases where they're spinning up thousands of systems every night. They have very specific targeted workloads. They run them for 4 or 6 hours, and then they tear all those thousand systems down at the end of the day, so they're not paying for them. Then tomorrow night, spin them all back up again, put in the new data set, run all the calculations. So we have to be able to grow and scale as they need it, and then shrink back down as they don't. So we don't want to get in the way of those environments, but we want to make sure that you're alerted to what's going on. So, hey, I just saw 3,000 servers spin up in your account. Is that something that you expected? We've seen some of those compromises recently where people got access to cloud environments. They weren't really being alerted to what was going on. So I could be taking those over. So maybe I'm just going to essentially steal cycles from you to mine my Bitcoin. If I get access to your environment, I can split a bunch of coin miners. You're paying the charge at Amazon. Everything's profit to me. Or other times maliciously, we're seeing people damaging systems. Where if I could get in there and I can just hit the big red delete button, and now you suddenly lost access to a big piece of your critical infrastructure, that may just put you out of business. So being able to manage and monitor those different things is very critical. The data is going to look a little different. The actions that are happening, aren't necessarily always just what's going on in my Linux box, but that I just spun up 1,000 of those boxes, and they're just coming online now, and my charges are going to go way up. My workload's going to get a lot bigger. Because especially with developers, if you give them access to a cloud environment, they will spin systems until you make them stop. because there's always another reason to spin another box. So being able to have alerting and controls around that, getting a lot more visibility from management into cost structures and what's going on and what I expect to see, all can be done with your SIEM because you have access to those planes, to those management environments. If you're thinking object storage, to those S3 buckets as they happen. So I can instantly be auditing. New object comes up, apply my security control audit, and alert management because somebody had this one open for read write and it should have been open for read. So those types of things, or maybe it shouldn't have been open at all because we didn't want anybody from the internet getting access to that bucket. It was supposed to be private. So all of that can be done. Then it gives you a lot easier visibility, a lot quicker visibility into those problems that can cause damaging issues for you.
Last question here before we run out of time, kind of relates to what you were just talking about. Question is, I've heard that SIEMs can also be useful to discover what's on your network or what's happening on your network. Is that true?
They certainly can be because maybe you don't always see what's hidden in the background because of what's going on. So as you're discovering different technologies being plugged in, kind of that rogue IT option, and it's not always completely inside of the SIEM. The SIEM has to know that the IP is there. There are ways though to have that automatically done. We do have a way to do it with ours where if we see an IP pop up on the network, it's discovered where it is on the network. So logically in relation to this thing is in building X on switch Y coming through router Z, but also popping it up automatically into the SIEM that says, hey, I just saw this new IP. Do you want to start monitoring it? Slide it to yes, or you can leave it off if you want. But that gives you that way to see what it is, where it is, and start to run that investigation. Because maybe it was just John over in the side of the wall plugging in a new printer, and it's got Wi-Fi access, because they almost all do these days. But John didn't hit the button to shut it off, and now that's a hole to come into my environment. So it is really important to be able to get that instant visibility because people are always probing, and they will find it, and you need to make sure that you found it first.
It's also always good to be in that position for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think that does a really good job of hitting all our questions from our audience. Some really good questions and good answers from you too, Bob. Appreciate that.
Hey, thank you for having me. Definitely promoting the link there on the page. That freemium version is full functioned. You just have a limited amount of assets you can plug in. So if you aren't using anything today and you want to start out, or you just want to start at a smaller scale, please grab it, play with it, turn it on, use it. It gives you the full options that we talked about today.
That'll be super handy for checking out your product. Thanks for sharing that. Well, great. Let's move on to a few things as we kind of exit out here. First is announcing our gift card winners. There are 3 winners of the $50 gift card are A. Grippa, D. Fern, and Sean, sorry, S. Berkey, I said your name there, Sean. Reminder that our webinar is recorded. We'll send out an email with links to the slides and also the recording. And remember to check out devops.com for additional webinars, future things coming up with help systems and others. Thank you for joining us. It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Bob Erdman, Senior Security Product Manager with Threat Solutions at Help Systems. Fantastic job.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you too to our audience. We know spending a whole hour of your time, it's super valuable, and we're honored that you spent it with us. It's been my pleasure hosting the webinar for you today. Have a great day and be careful out there.